Hey everyone, I am Doodleman149, and what? You thought I was done making history videos about Battlefield 1? Think again! I'm now going to go through all the weapons with elite codexes to give you some expanded insight into the production, use, and legacy of the weapons. We'll be starting this illustrious series with the German MP18. The MP18 is a German submachine gun designed and manufactured by Bergmann Waffenbrick, introduced into service in 1918 by the German Army during World War I. The MP18 was intended for use by German stormtroopers, assault troops specialized in trench combat, as a short-range offensive weapon that would provide individual soldiers with increased firepower over a pistol. Although the MP18 production ended after World War I, it was highly influential on subsequent small arms designs. It formed the basis of most submachine guns manufactured between 1920 and 1960. The history. What became known as the submachine gun has its genesis in the early 20th century and developed around the concept of mobile shooting and infiltration tactics, specifically for the task of clearing trenches of enemy soldiers. As I'm sure we can all understand, this was an environment where engagements were unlikely to occur beyond ranges of a few feet. So in 1915, the German Rifle Testing Commission at Spandau decided to develop a new weapon for trench warfare. An attempt to modify existing semi-automatic pistols, specifically the Luger and the C96 Mauser, failed, as sustained accuracy was basically impossible due to their light weight and the high rates of fire of around 1,200 rounds per minute. The commission determined that a completely new kind of weapon was needed. Hugo Schmeisser, working for the Bergmann Waffenbrick, was part of a team composed of Theodor Bergmann and a few other technicians. They designed a new type of weapon to fulfill the requirements, which was designated as the Maschinenpistole 18. 4 different versions of the MP18 were evaluated by the German Army, known as the Models 1, 2, 3, and 4. They shared the same basic design but exhibited differences in their feed systems. The MP18 Model 1 used the same trommel magazine drum as the artillery Luger. The trommel magazine is an iconic snail magazine that most people associate with the MP18. No details are available regarding the MP18 Model 2, however it is known that the MP18 Models 3 and 4 both fed from a straight 90-degree magazine feed which took Mauser box pattern magazines, of the same type used in Mauser's experimental CO6/08 pistol and the C17 trench carbine and later the Sig Bergmann. Full-scale production began early in 1918. The MP18 is often credited as the very first submachine gun, as some sources discount the Villar Perosa on account that it was originally fielded as a light support weapon on a mount. Whether the MP18 was actually the first submachine gun is debated. In regards to the Villar Perosa, in late 1916, the Military Aviation Corps of the Italian Army created the first official demand for a submachine gun when they requested the development of a single-barrel Villar Perosa. This was to have a detachable stock, which was made in early 1917 and later adopted as the Cabarenetta Automatica OVP, with 500 being issued to observation crews. The designer of the Villar Perosa, Colonel Bethel Abiel Ravelli, had already conceived the principles of the submachine gun in September 1915, when he wrote that this gun could be converted into a single-barreled version that may be mounted in a manner of a rifle so that it may be fired from the shoulder. It remains a matter of controversy as to whether he made a weapon matching this description, but the MP18 Model 1 was merely one of many submachine gun concepts that were developed at the time, and that it cannot be referred to with any certainty as the first. The MP18 Model 1 was the first mass-produced submachine gun to see extensive use in an infantry assault role in warfare. Speaking of the debate, let's take a look at another potential competitor for the title of first submachine gun. In October 1915, the Austro-Hungarian Standschützenbataillon trialed a submachine gun chambered in the 8x18 Roth cartridge, known as the Maschinengewehr Hellriegel. This was tested as both a support weapon fired from a prone position and as an assault weapon fired from the hip. Little is known about the Standschütz Hellriegel Model 1915. The only source of information about the Hellriegel is several photographs stored in the photo archive of the Austrian National Library. The photographs are dated October 1915 and show the weapon being tested at a firing range. Its name and magazine size indicate that it was an automatic firearm, and its designer was someone named Hellriegel from the Australian. The photographs are dated October 1915 and they show the weapon being tested at a firing range. Its name and magazine size indicate that it was an automatic firearm, and its designer was someone named Hellriegel from the Austrian unit Standschützen, tasked with the defense of Tyrol and Wallenberg regions of Western Austria. It was most likely a prototype and therefore explains its unfinished look and design. Its use in World War I. The MP18 served in the final stages of World War I in 1918. Shortly after reaching the front, the MP18 Model 1 was used in the Battle of Amiens. Canadian troops of the 13th Royal Battalion of Highlanders were photographed with a captured MP18 from the German lines on the 11th of August. Major General Ernst von Reisberg, the director of the Prussian War Ministry, wrote shortly after the end of the war that some 17,000 guns had been delivered by October 1918. This estimate is backed up by a military acceptance stamp reaching into the 17,000 serial mark. Existing serial numbers bear greater numbers into the 30,000 range. One estimate, based on the serial numbers of surviving guns, is about 35,000 were made during 1918 and possibly 1919. The vast majority were not actually accepted onto service and likely remained in the factory until a new demand was created in the interwar years. According to a French report made after the war, the Germans produced around 50,000 units in 1918, but only 8 to 10,000 were delivered. The number that actually reached the front is probably lower. The best indicator is the serial number range of the examples captured by the Allies in the second half of 1918. All MP18s that were captured were low serial numbers, typically in the hundreds. A reasonable estimate is that around 4,000 guns saw combat. Post-war service. The MP18 proved to be an excellent weapon. Its concept was well proven in trench fighting, the basic design directly influenced later submachine guns designs, and it showed its superiority over the regular infantry rifle in urban, mobile, and guerrilla warfare. One of the most notable post-war users of the MP18 Model 1 were the Free Corps, who armed themselves with weapons appropriated from military depots. The Free Corps ranks were composed primarily of former World War I soldiers who, upon demobilization, were unable to reintegrate into civilian society, having been brutalized by the violence of the war physically and mentally. Combined with the government's poor support of veterans who were dismissed as hysterical when suffering from PTSD, many German veterans found comfort and a sense of belonging in the Free Corps. After the armistice, Germany found itself embroiled with domestic strife in the form of the Spartacus uprising. Many submachine guns had not been sent to the front and were issued to Free Corps volunteers. The government collaborated closely with the Free Corps to crush the uprising and initially did little to stop these guns from falling into paramilitary hands. The MP18 proved to be particularly popular among these irregular forces. The MP18 was gradually retired from military service and allocated to police forces. The government's implementation of the Treaty of Versailles in 1924 approved the distribution of machine pistols, provided that they were not issued at a rate any higher than 1 gun for every 20 men. These weapons were stamped 1920 to signify that they had been approved for government issue. These guns were in legal possession of the state, but many more of the 50,000 guns that had been produced fell into the hands of unofficial paramilitaries or criminal elements. During the failed 1924 Estonian coup d'etat attempt, the MP18 was used to defend the Tallinn barracks from communist militants, some of which were armed with Thompson submachine guns. This was possibly the first engagement where submachine guns were used on both sides. All the limited conflicts between 1920 and 1940 saw an increased use of this new class of weapon. First in South America during the Chaco War, then in Europe during the Spanish Civil War, and in China during the Warlord era in the Second Sino-Japanese War, where its use by well-trained Chinese troops was costly for the invaders at the Battle of Shanghai. It was also used during World War II by various partisans and resistance forces. Old stocks of the MP18 Model 1 submachine guns were distributed as foreign aid to allies of the Third Reich in neighboring countries. These predominantly fell into the hands of fascist groups in France, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. In France, deliveries of the MP18, MP28, and MP35 submachine guns were made to the far-right nationalist organization La Cougue. Several armed dumps were discovered by the French police and destroyed prior to the Second World War. MP18 and MP28 submachine guns were distributed to the Austrian SS during their exile from their home country. The Austrian Nazi Party was banned after their attempted coup in 1934, and many members of the militant wing of the party went to Germany to receive training by the SS. The intent was to send these militants back to Austria, but a second coup never materialized. MP18 and MP28 submachine guns were distributed to the Austrian SS during their exile from their home country. The Austrian Nazi Party was banned after their attempted coup in 1934, and many members of the militant wing of the party went to Germany to receive training by the SS. The intent was to send these militants back to Austria, but a second coup never materialized. In Czechoslovakia, police confiscated several MP18s that had been smuggled into the country by the SS to arm sabotage squads. Some of these guns saw use during the Sudeten uprising of 1938. These weapons were sourced from old military stocks and still had their original feed systems, taking the TM-08 Trommel magazine. Bergmann MP35s were also supplied to the Hellenists. The MP18 remained in limited service with the German armed forces during the Second World War, specifically with later Eastern Foreign divisions of the Waffen-SS and also the Kriegsmarine coastal artillery units. Design details. The MP18 was a heavy weapon, weighing over 5 kilograms or 11 pounds when fully loaded. The receiver tube was very thick, which was around 3 millimeters, compared with later World War II submachine guns that saw half that thickness or less, such as the Sten gun or the MP40. Though Schmeisser designed a conventional 20-round capacity box magazine for the weapon, the testing commission, for practical reasons, insisted that the MP18 be adapted to use 32-round TM-08 Luger snail drum magazines that were widely used with the long-barreled version of the Luger pistol. Like many other open bolt designed weapons, the MP18 was prone to accidental discharge. If the buttstock of the loaded gun was given a hard knock while the bolt was fully forward, the gun could accidentally fire because of the bolt overcoming the action of the spring resistance and moving rearward enough to pick up a round, chamber it, and fire. Soldiers like to leave the bolt of their firearm in this closed or forward position so dirt and debris would not enter the barrel and chamber. This bolt closure practice acted as a dust cover for the weapon's chamber, preventing a malfunction from occurring because of the presence of debris, but making accidental discharges more likely. The German police asked for external safeties on their MP18s, and universal bolt locking safeties were added on all the submachine guns used by the police. Later submachine gun designs like the Sten and the MP40 were modified to allow the cocking handle to be pushed inwards to lock the closed bolt to the tubular receiver casing. The design change prevented accidental discharges when the bolt was left forward and a loaded magazine was inserted. Operation. The MP18 submachine gun is a simple blowback operated weapon firing from the open bolt. The original MP18 was designed to use the snail drum magazine of the Luger artillery model pistol. This rotary design type of magazine holds 32 rounds of 9mm parabellum, the user having to load the magazine with a proprietary loading tool. A special sleeve was required when the snail drum was used on the MP18 to stop the snail drum from being inserted too far into the magazine well. After 1920, the MP18 was modified to use a straight magazine similar to those of the later developed MP40 submachine gun. The MP18 can only fire in the fully automatic mode. Its successor, the MP28, received a modified mechanism with a selector for single shot or fully automatic fire. And so that's all I could find about the iconic MP18. There were a number of newer weapons that built off the basis of the MP18, most obviously the MP28 and the MP40, but to cover all the variations would have been very tedious. So what do you think of this style of video? Did you like learning about the specific weapon from World War I, or should I focus on more general topics? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I thank you for your time. I truly appreciate each and every second you lend to me. Also, don't forget, I've got Historical Battlefield 1 shorts coming out on Tuesday, so stay tuned for those. So with that, I've been your host, Doodleman149, and until next